Thank you so much, Erica. We actually initially met when I was at Definity. I don't know, yeah, but it's been a while, so it's easy to forget. I want to thank Erica for putting on not just SheFi, but the entire BUIDL week. It's a really challenging. I've been in similar positions, and it's a very hard thing to get right, to bring amazing people together, to have a nice, inviting atmosphere, and also talk about really important things. And so you've just killed it. So actually, a round of applause for Erica, please, and her team, of course, and everyone that's involved. Okay, so I'm Jelena. I'm the founder of Noble. So before we get into my topic, which is bringing real-world assets to the Cosmos ecosystem, I wanted to actually talk a little bit about the background of Noble. So personally, I never set out to, be a founder by age, 20, whatever. I'm not going to tell my age, but I did have an idea at the right time, and the idea actually came about pretty naturally. So back in 2022, we had a major event in the crypto ecosystem, which I'm sure a lot of people here remember, which was the collapse of the Terra kind of project, and specifically the UST stablecoin, which of course was a big project in Seoul. And myself, being a Cosmos core contributor and actually holding UST, the stablecoin, saw everything sort of collapse pretty quickly. And so myself and a couple of other people kind of got together, and we started thinking, how do we have a blockchain in the Cosmos ecosystem that can be a stable, neutral, secure place for stablecoins to be issued? And thus, Noble was born. So Noble is a Cosmos blockchain. In the Cosmos ecosystem, we have this idea of application-specific blockchains, or app chains for short. This goes back to the original Cosmos white paper of 2016. And this idea of app chains is that every Cosmos chain that builds on the Cosmos stack with using things like the Cosmos SDK and the Tendermint consensus engine, those chains are technically sovereign from the next. So you have total kind of control over your validator set, over your infrastructure, and you can build applications in a scalable way, and those blockchains can actually talk to each other. So if you are, for example, Osmosis, which is a very well-known decentralized exchange in the Cosmos ecosystem, that chain is interoperable with something like Noble, which is an asset issuance chain, and that's what our specific application is. So we'll go into more detail, but the one thing to know about Noble is made for digital asset issuance. So the Cosmos ecosystem, having this very sovereign sort of environment of many chains, having that central place for a stablecoin issuer like Circle for USDC to sort of land and be interoperable with all of the other projects in the ecosystem is very critical. So we serve one purpose. We work with asset issuers like USDC to onboard them into the ecosystem and to have this very nice, seamless, interoperable experience. So we went live with native USDC in September of last year. We've issued about $200 million of native USDC, and we of course have connections to the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem, and we're working with more issuers to onboard them onto the Cosmos stack and get them bootstrap in the ecosystem. So if you look at the kind of entire landscape of USDC, which of course is the second largest stablecoin right now, Noble is actually very, very similar to sort of leading layer twos like Polygon and others. And so we've been really fortunate and grateful to be this ambassador and this very prominent project in the space. So why is this important? Why is an app chain dedicated to stablecoins and real-world assets important? For one simple reason, and that's that blockchains are becoming modular. So as you have different sort of services, different roll-ups, different projects separating kind of parts of the stack, things like execution from consensus, different roll-up frameworks, you need a sort of architecture or sort of a service provider that can kind of conform to that and standardize around that. So Noble is working with many different ecosystems, including the Celestia ecosystem and others, to actually be that provider of liquidity and that sort of on-ramp for things like stablecoins. So we talked a little bit about the history of Noble and the fact that it was born out of a very specific need, which was no native stablecoins in the Cosmos ecosystem. But the thing that really kind of drives us is actually the fact that we consider ourselves as UX. Obviously, from an end user's perspective, we sort of understand the value of a stablecoin. But from a kind of blockchain perspective or from like a UX perspective, it actually unlocks a whole other sorts of kind of use cases and experiences. So the UX unlock of native USDC in the Cosmos ecosystem, of course, is bring liquidity and efficient multi-chain routing to issuers, app chains, and end users. We've designed the Noble chain and the sort of interoperability of the Noble chain with the rest of the ecosystem in a way that USDC has actually become the dominant stablecoin in the Cosmos ecosystem. We could have done this with any stablecoin. It just so happens that we had a really strong partnership and relationship with Circle. But if you actually look at us relative to the kind of competitor in the ecosystem, which is Tether, we're vastly kind of way more adopted, even though Tether, of course, has probably 2 times the market cap of USDC overall. So right now we have $200 million of native USDC on Cosmos chains like DYDX, Osmosis, and others. And Tether has only about 10 million on Cosmos chains, and they're issued on a chain called Kava. And so we have more than 20 times the kind of ecosystem penetration than a much larger stablecoin, which is Tether. But really, that's not because of the asset necessarily itself, but actually because we've created this UX kind of experience that's led to this explosion. And so in the last 30 days, we facilitated over $1 billion of USDC transactions within the ecosystem. So USDC via Noble issued to chains like Osmosis are completely fungible with the native asset that you would have on a chain like Ethereum. And you can, in fact, hop between Ethereum, Noble, Solana, Avalanche, and others in a native way due to something which is the cross-chain transfer protocol. So this is a really nice visualization that shows exactly where Noble kind of fits into this emerging kind of mesh network, you could say, of blockchains in the Cosmos ecosystem. I believe in a year, 5 years, we'll see very similar visualizations, but for rollups. And as you can see, Noble is connected to all of these places via the inter-blockchain communication protocol, which is the standardized kind of message passing system in Cosmos. And of course, you can see the volume, kind of above $1 billion in the last 30 days. So this is actually very organic growth. We're not like a layer 2 that, is connected to like a centralized entity where you can just like mint in tranches, like, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. This is actually completely organic kind of growth from, various app chains, like the ones that are shown above. So I talked a little bit about kind of the Noble UX kind of idea, right? We have USDC, which is the asset we leverage to provide that UX experience. But where do we go from there and kind of how do we optimize around this idea of Noble being UX? The nice thing about the Cosmos stack and something that I really kind of want to, impart on the people in this room is the Cosmos ecosystem is actually one of the most exciting places to build in my very biased opinion, in the sense that you have a very kind of modular kind of, framework for building things like modules, which is the Cosmos SDK itself. I spoke to someone briefly in the bathroom who was building in the Stargaze ecosystem, and I think those that have experience can sort of attest to the kind of ease of kind of the framework itself for building. So one thing that we built or are in the process of deploying on our mainnet is something called an automated interchain account. So at Biddle, Vitalik talked a little bit about like account abstraction, which is a thing he's been talking about for a very long time. Account abstraction is something that we've actually had in the Cosmos ecosystem for years, and that's something called an interchain account. So it's pretty much a way for me to register an account on something like Noble that can interact with an account on another chain like Osmosis to automate kind of certain functions, whether that's restaking or kind of delegations or token transfers, authorizations, multi-sig actions, things like this. And so we had a company, a project called Settleless, which is a company out of Korea that works with Krafton, which is, of course, one of the largest gaming companies in the world. They came to us because they were building a Cosmos chain called Settlist to do creator payouts in stablecoins. And so they envision a world where you can be kind of a gaming developer or a creator. Let's say you're making some sort of in-game like asset, like skins or something like this, and you should be sort of compensated for when that trades hands or when that's sold within the game itself. This is a Web 2 experience with Web 3 sort of infra on the back. And so they asked us, how do we do this in Cosmos with USDC? And so we came up with a framework called an automated interchain account that leverages the ICA standard, which already exists, and it has users opt in automatically to forward assets to destination chains, and actually even off-chain in one click. So I can be, a gaming developer that's built like a really cool sword, and I need to get paid for that. And I can do that, and I can actually pay that to my like Stripe account in this case in one click, via Noble. So in this case, we go Noble to Settlist to Stripe, and you can have that payout in a compliant way, which is super cool. So this is like the basic idea of like how you would do that, registering different packets and how it interacts with the forwarding module. But the idea that I want to kind of stress is because you have these kind of existing modules and standards, whether that's in the Cosmos SDK or within IBC itself, you can actually build these really nice custom workflows for a huge entity, like Crafton, for example. Okay, so my presentation was real world assets in Cosmos, and so far I've only really talked about kind of the background of Noble and stablecoins, but I did want to touch a little bit about how we're bringing RWAs to Cosmos in a similar fashion to kind of how we're working with Circle on USDC. So about a month ago, we announced our first RWA that is coming to the Cosmos ecosystem leveraging the Noble chain, which is at USYC. So this is a asset issued by Hashnote. Hashnote is equivalent in this case to a Circle. They sort of manage the reserves and the processes off-chain for the token representation, in this case of a treasury bill, on-chain. And in this case, this is the first ever vehicle for short duration UST bills, and that can settle, in T+1 days, which if you're familiar with like buying bonds, it's, a big unlock from like a UX perspective. So fully composable, native on-chain, regulated, and ultimately a useful thing to hold. This is briefly where Hashnote kind of fits into the landscape of other tokenized treasury bills. This is a kind of vertical that's taking off quite quickly, and so we're looking to support these sorts of assets. So how do we work with an asset issuer like Hashnote in this sense? We talked about, of course, how we work with an asset like USDC, but the ultimate sort of thing that we focus on is, of course, we're building custom logic for the token throughout the Cosmos. And building custom logic for a token in Cosmos is very different than building custom logic for a token on Ethereum. The reason being is the token itself originates not on a settlement layer or a base layer or like a monolithic layer like ETH, but it originates on a Cosmos chain, which technically, again, is independent and sovereign and non-fungible with another Cosmos chain like Osmosis. So the complexity kind of grows quite quickly, because if I'm Hashnote and I want sort of immediate distribution and access to app developers or end users, you simply deploy the smart contract. You have the necessary sort of parameters in place around things like blacklisting and KYC. But in Cosmos, it's much more complicated. There is no sort of one base layer to issue on, until, of course, Noble came around. So what we do is we work with the asset issuer to solve for kind of a number of factors. One is, how do we make sure that if we issue USYC on Noble, there will be an optimal US experience and people won't have to wrap and unwrap and bridge and do all these really annoying things. Another thing is more efficient liquidity on-ramps. So for something like a USYC, which actually changes in price depending on the yield or the price at that moment, how do we actually have a capital efficient way of kind of getting that to users? In the USDC concept, in the USDC example, I mentioned we built something called the cross-chain transfer protocol. And then thirdly, this one is pretty straightforward, but how do we make sure that we're supporting an app developer ecosystem that leverages these Noble issued assets? So for example, we work very closely with a wallet called Cypher, and Cypher is a Cosmos wallet, and you can actually, today load it up with USDC from Noble and spend that in stores. And we're actually exploring other apps on Cypher to even do something like have a kind of credit service where, instead of using Visa to pay for things, you can actually use, your crypto to actually pay for things on credit, which would be really cool if you can kind of get the risk controls in place, which we're working on. So at the end of the day, we really, really care about, making sure that the asset that we're kind of supporting, like a stablecoin like USDC, is as widely proliferated as possible throughout the entire Cosmos ecosystem. We are not interested in building walled gardens or, having this kind of cult following, which I think is very kind of common in crypto. I'm sure everyone has experienced that to some degree. We're actually trying to build something extremely practical and useful for the asset issuer, the end user, right, that just wants that stablecoin in their hand for whatever reason, and the app chain that wants to build services around that stablecoin. So at the end of the day, we don't want to kind of hoard that liquidity on our chain, on our infrastructure. We actually want to proliferate it and be the distribution mechanism. I like to think of us similar to a Visa network. Visa itself does not issue their own kind of currencies, but they connect merchants to banks, to customers. And so they end up being that kind of highway underneath that, proliferates commerce and activity. All right. So yeah, this is pretty much how we work with issuers like Hashnote. Step 1, custom infrastructure. Okay, how do we build out the token? Step 2, integration. How do we work with your, APIs and things like this? And then 3, one-to-one functionality with what you have on Ethereum. So really bringing that kind of UX, kind of seamless kind of UX on a chain like ETH, but in a very sovereign, interoperable, kind of more decentralized context like Cosmos. So at the end of the day, we're bringing assets to Cosmos. There's no monolithic architecture in Cosmos. We need that stability, reliability, and neutrality, and that is what Noble brings for asset issuers. We translate specifications into Cosmos standards, mostly EVM specs, and we do infrastructure integrations, compliance, and of course, interoperability with the entire ecosystem. So Noble, at the end of the day, is optimal UX for stablecoins, for RWAs, and we're just trying to grow the pie. So thank you so much.